Have you ever heard of an army that fought not with guns, but with paint, sound, and imagination? During World War II, the United States created a secret unit unlike any other. Known as the Ghost Army, they deceived the enemy with inflatable tanks, fake radio signals, and clever illusions. This is the story of how artists, actors, and engineers helped change the course of history. The Ghost Army was made up of just over 1,000 men, but their impact was far greater. Using creativity instead of firepower, they staged illusions that made the enemy believe huge divisions were nearby. Their mission? To save lives through deception. Imagine a battlefield where tanks were rubber, trucks were painted canvas, and soldiers' footsteps came from loudspeakers. That was the Ghost Army's world. They turned imagination into a weapon of survival. This unit was officially called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. But to history, they're remembered as the Ghost Army, a band of artists and dreamers who painted their way into the war effort. The men who joined weren't typical soldiers. Many were art students, set designers, and sound engineers. They traded brushes and instruments for camouflage nets and inflatable tanks. Their secret was mobility. Within hours, the Ghost Army could create the illusion of a massive force, then vanish just as quickly, leaving the enemy chasing shadows. They built fake camps with laundry hanging on lines, fake jeeps driving in circles, and even fake generals giving orders. Every detail was designed to convince enemy spies. Sound was one of their greatest tools. Using huge speakers, they blasted recordings of tanks moving, trucks unloading, and soldiers marching, all carefully mixed to sound real. Their inflatable tanks were so convincing from the air that enemy pilots often reported entire armored divisions where none existed. The deception worked time and again. Unlike most units, the Ghost Army's goal wasn't to fight, but to mislead. They absorbed enemy attention, allowing real divisions to strike elsewhere with surprise. One of their most daring missions was along the Rhine River in 1945. The Ghost Army staged a fake crossing to distract the enemy. While real forces attacked miles away, many members of the Ghost Army went on to become famous after the war. Some became well-known artists, fashion designers, and even Hollywood creators. The unit's existence was kept secret for decades. It wasn't until the 1990s that the world finally learned about their extraordinary contributions. By creating illusions instead of battles, the Ghost Army is believed to have saved tens of thousands of lives. Their mission was deception, but their legacy is preservation. They carried sketchbooks as often as rifles. Between missions, many soldiers drew the landscapes, people, and even their inflatable creations. In many ways, the Ghost Army blurred the line between war and theater. They staged performances of power, convincing the enemy of things that didn't exist. Camouflage was more than just hiding. For the Ghost Army, it was storytelling, creating entire fictional armies out of rubber, paint, and sound. The unit included fashion designer Bill Blass, who later became a giant in the clothing industry. His artistic eye first served on the battlefield of deception. Each mission was a gamble. If the enemy discovered the ruse, the Ghost Army would be defenseless, with no heavy weapons to protect themselves. Despite the danger, they succeeded again and again. Their illusions gave us forces the upper hand during key campaigns across Europe. Think of it as a stage play with the highest stakes imaginable. The Ghost Army were actors on the world's deadliest stage, and their audience was the enemy. They used fake radio transmissions, with operators pretending to be entire divisions. Skilled at mimicking military chatter, they fooled enemy intelligence networks. The Ghost Army's missions were often so convincing that even Allied soldiers sometimes thought the fake divisions were real. They didn't just trick enemy eyes, they tricked their ears. Sound engineers layered effects to simulate battalions moving, making villages shake with the illusion. Inflatable artillery was light enough for 4 men to carry, yet realistic enough to fool enemy scouts with binoculars. The Ghost Army's success was built on teamwork. Artists, engineers, and sound specialists worked together to create the perfect illusion. Their unofficial motto was simple: "We deceive so others may live." That's exactly what they did. One mission required them to imitate the 2nd Armored Division. With inflatable tanks and loudspeakers, they convinced the enemy it was camped in an empty field. The unit could set up a fake base with tents, vehicles, and soldiers in less than a day. 2 spies watching from a distance, everything looked authentic. Soldiers even wore patches from other divisions, pretending to be units they were not. Disguise was as important as any camouflage net. For many in the Ghost Army, this was their first time blending art with military strategy. They invented new techniques under constant pressure. They used paint and canvas to disguise trucks as tanks, or jeeps as artillery. The artistry was so effective it could withstand close observation. One famous mission had them convincing the enemy that Patton's army was preparing to attack. In truth, the real attack was happening elsewhere. The Ghost Army wasn't just about trickery, it was about psychology. They studied how the enemy thought and designed illusions to exploit those expectations. They could make a small unit look like thousands. It was military magic, convincing, elaborate, and life-saving. Many soldiers in the Ghost Army wrote letters home describing their strange work, but secrecy prevented them from explaining the details. Unlike traditional units, their weapons were air compressors, paintbrushes, and recording equipment. Tools of deception became tools of victory. Some missions required them to act like ordinary soldiers, cooking, singing, and moving around just to sell the illusion of a real division. They even used fake tire tracks, dragging heavy chains behind jeeps to mimic the movements of tanks. Every detail mattered. The unit's success depended on absolute secrecy. If captured, their unique mission would be exposed, and the danger would increase. At times, Ghost Army soldiers felt like actors lost in their own play, knowing their performance could save lives far away. Despite the danger, very few from the Ghost Army were lost. Their courage was measured in illusions, not battles. Their story remained classified for nearly 50 years. Only recently have documentaries, books, and museums begun to honor their work. In 2022, the Ghost Army was finally awarded the Congressional Gold Medal for their extraordinary service. Recognition had arrived at last. Many veterans of the unit lived long enough to see their secret work finally acknowledged by the nation they served. Their deception campaigns are now studied in military schools as examples of innovation and psychological strategy. The Ghost Army proved that creativity can be as powerful as force. Their artistry rewrote the rules of warfare. They set up fake airfields with wooden planes, designed to draw enemy bombers away from real targets. Each mission was carefully planned with maps, sketches, and sound charts. Deception was treated as both an art and a science. Their inflatable tanks weighed only a few hundred pounds, but visually, they looked identical to real Sherman tanks from the sky. Their speakers could project sound up to 15 miles away, making it seem like entire battalions were on the move. While other units advanced into battle, the Ghost Army slipped into empty spaces, setting traps of illusion for the enemy. The unit's work inspired future military deception tactics in conflicts long after the war ended. For decades, the Ghost Army veterans carried their secret, unable to tell friends or family about their true mission. In truth, their battlefield was imagination. They fought with shadows, sounds, and shapes, creating fear from thin air. Even enemy prisoners sometimes described being surrounded by huge American forces that never actually existed. They could make a handful of trucks appear to be an entire armored convoy simply by looping around roads in clever patterns. For the Ghost Army, success meant staying invisible, letting others believe the fiction they carefully created. They disguised their inflatable tanks with mud and paint, so they would look weathered and real to aerial surveillance. Missions often took place at night, giving the soldiers time to inflate their decoys under the cover of darkness. The Ghost Army blurred the boundary between art studio and battlefield, using creativity as a shield. Their illusions often bought time for real divisions to regroup, reinforce, or strike at vulnerable enemy positions. Many veterans later said it was the strangest role they ever played, soldiers pretending to be soldiers they were not. The Ghost Army's missions weren't always glamorous. Inflating rubber tanks was hard, dirty work, but vital to success. The unit used deception not to glorify battle, but to shorten it, sparing countless lives through misdirection. Even today, their story feels like something out of a movie, yet every detail really happened. Behind every inflatable tank and every fake broadcast was a team of ordinary young men doing extraordinary things. Though their weapons were rubber and sound, their courage was as real as any other unit on the front lines. Their story reminds us that bravery doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means creating illusions that protect others. For decades, they were unsung heroes, the Ghost Army is remembered as one of the most creative and courageous units in history. The legacy of the Ghost Army proves that imagination can save lives, and that sometimes the greatest victories are won not by force, but by deception.